Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Hi. We're going to go around and we're going to share the best thing that happened today. Okay? Do you want to start over? No, I'm just kidding. We'll just do a big group thing. Did we all have a good day? Yeah. Good first day? Awesome. Are we loving our amazing teachers or what? Yes. We have a great lineup for you tonight for our faculty talk, our first faculty talk of the week. We're going to hear from poet and past Falk Fellow Samyak Shertok to begin with. Really happy about that. And beloved Provincetown painter Pete Hocking is with us also. Longtime teacher here at the Fine Arts Work Center. They're both going to give their presentations, and then they'll come back up here to do a joint Q&A afterwards, which is often super, super, super interesting, so do stick around for that. A bit of housekeeping, other items of interest. Tomorrow, how many people went to Chandra's talk this morning? A couple? Glad you went? Interesting? Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. Tomorrow, you'll have another opportunity for another talk. Laura Shabbat, who's a longtime member of the Falk family, is going to give a talk about the founding members of the Fine Arts Work Center. It's very interesting. She knows so much about the art, the history of Provincetown as an artist community, and is a painter herself, very talented painter, and is also hilarious. So it's a great combination, and you should definitely come to this talk. It's at 12:30. Bring your lunch, and you'll have a good time. She's a riot, and we love her very much. And remember, what's Thursday night? Student Showcase. That's right. You guys are great. Did we put the sheet out for sign up? Did that happen today? The sign up sheet? Anyway, we're going to have it put out damn soon. If it's not out there already, it should be. And if it's not, it's going to be on the table, on the coffee table between the two sofas, and then just sign up. And do sign up. I don't care where you sign up. It could be on line 1. It could be on line 21. I don't care. You won't regret it. It'll be the best experience you've ever had because you will never have a more embracing and celebratory audience as you will on Thursday night here. So if you're nervous is good, but do your best to get over it and sign up because you'll really be glad that you did. I'd like to remind you to consider supporting our honor tax by making a donation to the Native Land Conservancy. There's a QR code. Can you hold that up, please, Matt? That makes it as easy as possible. There's the URL or honor. Yeah, there it is, the QR code thing. Thank you, Matt. We have some books by current week teachers. We've had some shipping issues, so more will be coming as the week comes. So don't fear if you don't get one tonight. There will be more coming later in the week. So thank you for your patience on that. There will be some back there. So Samyak will be signing books after a few. Won't take long. But you'll have more later on in the week. And we also have some sweet merch in the back. We got new t-shirts that just arrived last week, new caps. We have totes and notebooks, really good souvenirs for you to take home after your week here. So consider picking up some merch. There's also more books in the bookstore between the two halves of the gallery, so be sure to check those out sometime this week. And also, if you haven't already, check out our new exhibition that just went up last week called Making Space Painting Time, which is curated by Fox staff members Jerome Green and Sean Horton. It's a great show. Please take a look. Restrooms are down the hall on the left-hand side. There's a drinking fountain opposite it. And finally, please do us a favor and turn your cell phones to silent so you're not that person. And now I'd like to invite one of Samyak's students, Brad Crownover, to the stage to introduce Samyak. Thank you. Brad.
Well, hello, everybody. Good evening. So I'm here to introduce a very kind, generous poet and teacher. Samyak Shertok debut collection, No Rhododendron, University of Pittsburgh Press 2025, was selected by Hahn for the 2024 AWP Donald Hall Prize for Poetry and shortlisted for the 2026 Penn Open Book Award and the 2026 Nosrat Yassini Poetry Prize. His poems appear in the Cincinnati Review, the Gettysburg Review, the Iowa Review, the Kenyon Review, Poetry, Shenandoah, Waxwing, Best New Poets, and elsewhere. A finalist for the National Poetry Series, the Agnes Lynch Starrett Poetry Prize, and the Jake Adam York Prize, he's received fellowships from Aspen Words, the Helene Willitzer Foundation, and the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. His work has been awarded the Robert and Adele Schiff Award for Poetry, the Gulf Coast Prize in Poetry, and the Auburn Witness Poetry Prize. Originally from Nepal, he is an assistant professor of English at Mississippi State University. And I must say, already, just this first day, he has inspired myself and my classmates into new ways of experiencing and seeing the world around us. So please welcome Samyak Shertok.
Hello. Can you hear me? Thank you, Brad, for that kind, generous, and lovely introduction. Thank you, David. Thank you, summer program staff. Thank you, Sharon, as always. This is my 4th time at FOG. The first time I was here was in 2018, and it was as one of the workshop participants in Ada Limon's class. So it always feels like a homecoming when I get to come back. And thank you for my wonderful class. We just got started, and I cannot wait to see all the brilliant works and the broadsides you'll produce, which you all will get to see on the open studio night, I hope. Since I was here in last November for a Fog Friday, and I thought, what could I read? I cannot just repeat the same things. So obviously there are only so many poems in the book, but I thought I would at least begin by reading a poem which I've never read at any of the readings during my short book tour. This poem is and I'm teaching the Haibun class, and I was, it's a bummer that there aren't any Haibuns in my book, but I do have a form called Gazabun, where the haiku is replaced by a ghazal couplet. So I thought, in honor of my class, I would begin with that poem. This poem is also about ancient Himalayan ritual where after someone passes away, the body is returned to the elements through griffon vultures called sky burial. Y'all can hear me? Okay. Sky burial. Once in a Himalayan kingdom, the prince was born three-horned and cannibal. He was forbidden to leave the palace, and the victims were smuggled in from the far-flung villages on new moon nights. One such woman was scratching his scalp when a tear broke on a horn. The prince asked her if she had any last wishes. One whose name we cannot speak. I'm not afraid of dying, she said, wiping the horn with her braided lock. But I'm double-bodied and wish to be forgiven by my child. The prince said, I have no such gift, Nana, but I can spare your womb under one condition. Speak of tonight to no one. She swore on her unborn baby. He handed her 5 raw sunflower seeds. bury these where no man can reach. But the moment she stepped outside the palace gate, her tongue burned with the dark knowledge. She began chewing on the shelled seeds to cool her mouth. Once deep into the juniper forest, she dug a hole in the earth with her bare hands. But instead of closing the wound with the last seed, she whispered into it. In the morning, the junipers knew, and the snow leopard cubs. The wind knew, and the 108 stars. The woman, forbidden from touching the earth, was turned into the dafe that must be born and must die on the wing. The prince was banished with a shaved head and a curse, one whose name we cannot speak. In the next life, you shall eat only rotten flesh. He was reborn as the vulture, and in penance ferries the dead by sky-bearing their bodies to heaven. Night bees, moths in the flame, heirs to the sky-head, we shall rapture in heaven. War never ends, the dead still dead, vultures, more vulture in heaven. I have a long sonnet sequence, which is an elegy for my father, whom I lost in 2011 to cancer. And I'm always afraid to read too many from that sequence, partly because I don't know how much grief we can handle at any given time. But I thought I would try to read a few from that sequence tonight. So if at any point, if it becomes too much, just I don't know, just say stop, or come whisper in my ear. And this sonnet sequence is titled A Sky Burial, and each sonnet on the page, I don't know if you can see it, but it's toward the bottom, and each sonnet is inverted, or I like to call sky buried. So, and the sequence is sonnets to be read from the earth to the sky. But my ideal reader, I hope, will read it both ways. Since I'm reading more than one, I won't have the time to read it to you both ways, but I hope if you get a chance, you'll read it both ways. And I'll read a few for now, just in one way. A Sky Burial, sonnets to be read from the earth to the sky, and each sonnet is numbered X. X. I kneel beside your bed. I see a crow, feathers crust to black salt. I feel nothing. Somewhere behind me, Amma breaks her prayer beads. No more, Nana, her sister's coo. You will make the dead linger. She cries harder. I want to keep you a little longer, but what can I offer? I have no hands to gather salt into song. I look at the sky splayed on linen. Don't touch the body, a voice reminds me. The last time you held my hand on the way to the terminal 5 winters ago. Won't you say something? Someone asked from the naked dark. Keen eyes weigh the tears I won't shed soon enough. But what is there to say to whom? X. What does it mean to know a body? Body that is now salt, now ash. Once I thought Appa was the most revered man in the whole village, and feared. So at 12, to test in rage our sinew, I flung his soiled rainboot at his back. He turned around. A crow flew into his face and closed its gaudy wings around his cheeks. The crow that never forgets. I wanted Appa to slap the bird off our face. Instead, he lashed with his bright beaded eyes. I know Appa's body only through his hands, bread, bruised, beast, rabid, burning, bladed. X. Legend has it, Appa once finished the whole half sheep left behind by a tiger. He never ate out. Sometimes he returned with a kilo of mangoes, always raw or too sweet. He drank the ghee-seared rice spirit only to thwart cold. Appa never wore the linen shorts. He was always home. He had no friends. Sometimes I pretended he was not there. He never allowed us to play card games. We always played card games. Sometimes when he was napping, we cleaned his pockets. Sometimes he served us ghee. He always made sure everyone was home before killing the last lamp. He never went to school, which is to say, he never learned to write my name with ink in English, which is to say, he taught himself to write with his backhand. Appa never believed a man could hold a boy and the boy not fall into a myth. X. A stir by the spring. Prince Dashratha unleashed an arrow. When he went to claim his kill, he found a young man kneeling, his back a shaft-pierced well. Shravan Kumar was taking his blind parents on a pilgrimage, one hand still on the pitcher. Take this to my parents, waiting beneath the peepal tree, Kumar said with his last breath. The prince unknotted the still warm grip on the jug, filled it with clean dark water. When he handed the thirst kill to Kumar's parents, they asked, "Where's our child?" The prince said, "First drink it." But they would not touch the blood water and died beneath the faded tree. A shrine lies where Kumar fell. If you pour water into the stone navel, you can never fill up the hole. X. When he visits you at night, draw an unhusked barley line before the shrine. Show him to the living room. Death is like a dream, he once said in his own voice. Only you don't wake until the Maya vessel forgives your breath. Does what transmutes us also mute us? Mute once the cry of the hounds on the hunt. Offer him cold well water. Ask him, how do you like the new place? His eyes appear soft, but keep your distance. He is still not used to your touch. Say, I would tell everyone you are here, but they're all asleep. Watch him unremember. Later, you'll empty the untouched cup into his rain boot under your bed. You will wake up in flesh and wonder, what's there to forgive? Whose vessel? But now, no crow dance, no cut lock, no wrought wreath, no rhododendron, only a son trying to say, tell me a story, Appa. I'm here, beside you, all night. I'll end the sonnet sequence there. We made it. We made it to the other side. So this summer, I was really hoping to go home. I'm still hoping to go home. I'm originally from Nepal. And for various reasons, I have not been able to go home. So I thought I would read you a poem about the speaker, AKA the poet me, going back for the first time, which was based on some facts, maybe. And it's a longish poem. You all doing okay? Okay. How to return to Kathmandu after 5 years in America. Anyone been to Nepal? Oh, yes. What was Chandra doing? Finger snap? how to return to Kathmandu after 5 years in America. When the captain announces the descent, do not think about it. Instead, focus on the needles breaking inside your left temple. Breathe in the air you have been breathing for the past 4 hours. Exhale the sinusitis through your ears with no success. As the hot tears glide, say, I will never fly again. Close your eyes and begin naming the splinters, arrowheads, long-distance calls, weakest passport, stolen Buddhas, smuggled snow leopard claws. Look out the window. Season of blackbirds and amnesia. Below, city of temples, load-shedding cleaved. Wonder if your house, amidst the riot of generators, will be burning with a butter lamp. When the wheels touch the tarmac, watch the people around you clap and whistle the way you and your brother did when the Mahanayak fell out of the shocked sky, slow-mo 3 times, just in time to save the beautiful and helpless heroine and made her fall in love with a single no-look punch. Look at the eyes gleaming with hope and feldspars. The migrant workers returning home for 1 week from nameless deserts. Do not empathize. When you were memorizing carpals, metacarpals, phalanges, they were busy watching the B-grade movies. Forget how, had it not been your brother's 10 years at Red Lantern in Frankfurt, you'd still be rotting in that leech-infested village of yours. Become the Nepali sir at the secondary where the students read bookless. Forget you haven't spoken to him in 2 years. When Amma asks, why don't you call him sometime? He's your Jojo. You said, he just doesn't get me. Watch the migrants unbuckle themselves and reach for their tarped luggage. When the flight attendant implores them to remain seated, feel sorry for her. Look at this pakhes, defacing the few cultured Nepalese like yourself. The reason you left this land vowing to never return. This and 1,000 other reasons. Feel the bitterness towards your fatherland rise to your throat like famished crows. Keep an eye for someone ahead of you to drag your hand carry behind him. And when you tell him, excuse me, I think that's mine, in the accent you have been practicing all these years just for this moment, expect him to look neither stunned nor blanched. When the attendant taps your shoulder and you find the cabin empty and the shards in your head stilled, smile weakly. Inside, the terminal is a gutted warehouse. 2 candles gutter at the customs counter, load shedding even at the airport. By the carousel, expect your luggage to have been ransacked for iPhones, laptops, and the wool overcoat you bought for Amma, and different locks which you'll have to break at home with the pestle. When both the suitcases arrive unviolated, say, long live the load shedding. Grab a trolley with a stuck wheel that sings like Jojo in the shed after tasting Appa's ghee for losing a calf while grazing the buffaloes. At the arrival gate, look for Amma in the fish market crowd. And when you don't see her, look again. Your flight landed 10 minutes early, and in this country, not even monsoon arrives in time. Say traffic, and sit on a plastic chair welded to the brick wall. When the last counter is shuttered, scour the depleted crowd. She isn't coming. Walk right past the payphone. Outside, a feverish hive swarms you. Everest taxi, #1 taxi driver of Kathmandu. This way, Tamil, Bodha, say it, we're there. Step into that shack and he'll skin you like a street dog. 1,000% satisfaction guarantee. Wrestle your luggage free of the vulturing hands only to realize each hunger-wrought face must be someone's brother trying to survive in this city of ghost brothers. Let them tussle. Follow the potbelly to a taxi with a BMW sticker on the rear windshield. Wonder if halfway home you will tell him to take you to a hotel instead. When you reach for the door, you feel a tug. An old woman is staring at you. I think you have mistaken. You begin, but your throat catches. Despite the rain-beaten Lokta face, of course you recognized her. When you finally ask, "What took you so long?" she says, "We have been waiting outside for 2 hours." Then, "Bless Buddha, my Kansa is home." Watch her eyes fill with the clean light you could not forget even in the deserts of the Saguaro Nation. And your head stings. The needles have returned, wetted and jagged and too many, and you know this time they mean business. So instead of bowing to receive the prayer shawl ready on her hand, gather her sparrow bones in your jet-lagged arms. Close your eyes. Snow leopard ancestors, land of the prodigal tears, mother tongue arrowhead, go ahead, do your worst. And I'll just end with a very short poem, which is also the last poem in the book. Thank you very much for all of you for being here and for having me. This poem is about my oral mother tongue, Tamang, which does not have a script. So one of the challenges for the book was how do you write about a language that has no script? And this poem sort of addresses that question in a slightly oblique way. Thank you again. The last Himalayan beekeeper. Let it be said, Amma was the last Himalayan beekeeper. When she harvested honey barehanded in the stone house we lived in, she took not juniper smoke but song to the hive. Home is one blossom and 1,000 stings. The bees flew into her oiled black hair, and when she combed it, down fell rhododendrons. Let it be said, not a single bee stung her. The summer before I left home, she fed me raw honey from her palm every night. In the dark, I learned to hold bees in my throat, one for every ancestor. Let it be said, not a single bee died. Now, every time I misremember the word of the horse ghost, I get stung in the windpipe. With each perished bee, Amma becomes more smoke. Let it be said, if you plunge your hand into an abandoned hive, you will still get stung. At night, Amma plucks stingers from my tongue with her nails. Each barb she binds to her lock, and her crown grows more thorn than rhododendron. Let me skyberry them, Amma, while they're still alive. No, Tamang, she opens the wounds with crushed hooves. Your mouth is our last hive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samyak Shertok. Please, another round of applause. Beautiful, beautiful words. Thank you for sharing. And thank you, Brad, for that wonderful introduction. And now I'd like to introduce a student of Pete Hocking's to the stage to introduce Pete. Please welcome Amanda McFarland to the stage.
Hard to follow you after such a beautiful reading. So yes, my name is Amanda McFarland, and here to introduce Pete. Pete is a teacher, painter, and curator, and a writer on Cape Cod. His work is concerned with nature, place, poetics, and identity. He's a founding member of Provincetown Commons, an economic development center for creative economy. He taught at Rhode Island School of Design from 1997 until 2022, and from 2003 to 2021, he was a full-time faculty member at Goddard College Fine Arts Program for Interdisciplinary Arts Program. He was director of RISD's Office of Public Engagement from 2007 to 2011 and associate dean of the college and director of the Sweener Center for Public Service at Brown University. There's this really great article that was provided to me where they say, it's from the Provincetown Independent, summer of 2021, Hocking remains a bit of a magician when it comes to depicting the Outer Cape landscape through precisely measured and perfectly articulated tracks of paint. Step in close and his canvases dissolve. Step back and take in the relaxing balm of the scene. Pete says, I don't want to be blinded by things over which I have no control. I want to live in radical amazement of what's before me. I want my paintings to be instigated by joy. His work memory is instrumental in his work in both the way it's created and the way it's beheld and experienced. It was remembering walks he took with his parents as a child that sparked his love for the Cape Cod National Seashore, and he hopes that the same feeling is captured by all of us. Pete says that he likes to tell of his students, if you came here to paint like me, you're in the wrong place. I'm here to help you paint like you. On a personal level, we sign up for these courses like months in advance, and then there's all this anticipation of, well, who's this guy? And let me do some research. And, there's a lot of anticipation there. So last week, Pete sent us all an email. And I was so glad that it came when I only had 2 more working days left, because I legitimately was so thrilled in those 2 days, thinking my imagination is wide open. This is going to be so great. And just the generosity and just the tenderness of the email was amazing. And so it's with great pleasure to have you join me in welcoming Pete Hocking to the stage.
I suddenly have a lot to live up to. So I want to thank everyone at the Work Center. It is always just a delight to be here and to be gathered with all of you. And it is a place where I think one arrives and feels cared for. And that has so much to do with the summer team and also the people who are here year-round and creating a space where those of us who visit can be creative, can take risks, and can get to the business, the very important business of making art. I usually have something prepared for this faculty talk at the Work Center, and this week snuck up on me. And I woke up, on Saturday, I was like, uh-oh. So I decided to do something that I don't usually do, which is actually to do a kind of straight artist talk and talk about my work. I've been a teacher for a long time, like 40 years. And I left higher education 4 years ago. I didn't retire. I just sort of left because I felt like I'd done it and I needed to do other things. And one of the most gratifying parts of leaving higher education, and I loved working with undergraduates, I loved working with graduate students. But I love even more working with adult learners, because people who show up at places like the Work Center are here because they want to unleash the creativity that's within them. They, unlike the occasional 18-year-old who shows up at art school and isn't quite sure why they're there, everyone who shows up in a place like this knows why you're here. And I teach a lot now, as much as I did when I was in higher education. online and in person. And the delight in meeting with people who are often in their second act, sometimes in their third act, who often have a story that echoes in some way of, I wasn't allowed, or I couldn't figure out, or there wasn't space in my life, or I had these responsibilities. But now I get to be creative, and I get to pursue this dream, this passion, this aspiration to be an artist. And in the workshops I do, and with the learners who I'm, very lucky to be working with, an idea often emerges like, I've got to find my style. And I think to myself, like, uh-oh, I haven't found mine. I don't even know what that means. So part of this talk is to look at work that I've created over the last 40 years, and to look at things that are, what's the visual language? What's the vocabulary? And so in the work that I'm showing, hopefully what you'll see is I've used a lot of different strategies. This first slide, which I apologize for because it's really tiny, it's like really old, and I don't have a really good photograph of this because this is from 1988. And this is a painting I made that was part of my thesis show as an undergraduate at Rhode Island School of Design. And you can't really see it all that clearly, but I was looking a lot of Richard Diebenkorn. And if you know Richard Diebenkorn's work, I am cribbing a lot of things in this painting about space and how space is constructed visually. Can we go to the next slide, please? I was still looking at Richard Diebenkorn the next year, and this is after I graduated, and where my time got compressed because I started working for Brown University, had a full-time job, I was responsible for myself, I was, paying my own bills, and this is the view out of the window of my apartment, my first apartment as an adult by myself. And it's a visual strategy that I'm taking from Richard Diebenkorn. Richard Diebenkorn, I talked about this morning. He was drawing from Henri Matisse, and Matisse was drawing from Paul Cézanne. And so there's this sense of kind of lineage. And as artists, whether we're writers or visual artists, performers, we're part of this just amazing lineage. And we can choose who we want to be in conversation with in the various threads that are out there in work. And that's my lineage. Next slide, please. Again, you can sort of see some of those same issues. This was made at the same time. Next slide. And this is made about 6 years later. And I'm starting to look at the landscape differently. I'm looking at big plains. I'm starting to think about color fields. I'm thinking about energy, so the energy of that water, the energy of the land and our relationship to it. Next slide, please. Again, color fields. So if you think about Mark Rothko's paintings, these big color fields that vibrate, I'm drawing from that. I'm looking at a lot of that. I'm thinking about how does that work within a landscape. Next slide, please. And then I went to graduate school and everything changed. And for people in my generation and a little younger than me, when we went to graduate school, painting was not in fashion. And the generation of faculty who mentored us sort of kicked their graduate professors, who are all painters, off the pedestal to create new discourses in art, conceptual art, performance art, installation, other ways of activating the imagination and engaging audience. And so when I got to graduate school, painting, really? Do people still do that? And I'm a passionate picture maker, and I always have been, and I love painting. I love the material. I love the alchemy of being able to turn these pigments into something that depicts something. My theory of art comes from anthropologist named Ellen Dissanayake, and she did a survey of global cultures in what we in the West might call art, but that word's not used in most cultures in the world. And she came up with an elegant description that art making is the human proclivity to make special that which is important, to bring attention to what's important, with the impulse to share it with others. And that for me is what picture making is, that I want to bring attention to things that I find beautiful, places that I want to share, ideas beyond that. So in graduate school, and this is true of so many painters in my generation, we had to come up with a conceptual hook in order to justify being a painter. And so my work became very autobiographical. And so the next sequence of paintings are going to be autobiographical and figurative. So this is called Requiem Resist, and it's about cutting my ponytail off to become an adult. Next slide. This is another autobiographical painting, experimenting sort of with the singular figure, trying to find poetry in gesture and in placement of the figure. Next slide, please. But I could never give up landscape. So there were these like wonderful opportunities that I was doing a lot of work with the nonprofit community in Providence, Rhode Island, and there would be auctions for various nonprofits that I was associated with, and they'd be like, would you give us a landscape painting? And I'd be like, yes! So I started to paint in Providence, again, where I was living and where I went to school. So you can see a relationship in this painting from, I think, early 2000s, like 2001, 2002, to what I was doing back in the early 80s. I'm drawing back to that vocabulary, even though that vocabulary isn't front and center in the work that I'm making for my graduate faculty. Next slide, please. So to go further with the kind of conceptual project, I had to find ways beyond the single autobiographical figure to work with the figure in painting. And I'm adopted, and so I created at the point that I was making this work, I had never met anyone to whom I was biologically related. And so there are all these things that until I was in my 40s were baffling to me. Like people would say like, oh, I'm turning into my mother or I'm turning into my father. And I'd be like, I've gotten less like them every year since I moved out of the house. And things, you know, just like you've got your father's eyes. I like looked like no one. And so what I attempted to do was to create a set of paintings, one for each year of my life to that point in my life, of father-son portraits. I don't know if I'm the father, I don't know if I'm the son. I'm both, obviously, in some way. But there's a twinning thing that's going on in these paintings. Next slide, please. And also a way of trying to explore relationships and things like connection and also alienation within those kinds of relationships. Next slide, please. This one you can't really see, but it's a kind of argumentative painting. Next slide, please. These are large. These are like 4 feet by 5 feet. So when you are in the presence of them, the figure is your size. So you're really stepping into whatever it is these part of my personas are dealing with. This is my, that is very much the figure on the lower left is very much how I spent my adolescence. So that's very autobiographical. And in fact, the other figure is very much how I spent my young adulthood, so autobiographical as well. And the conceit of the project was the two people are 17 years apart in age, so they're close enough to be brothers in some ways, but also have this other kind of parental child. Next slide, please. Sometimes they have little markers of what was going on in my life, like, you know, cigarettes or The Dark Knight Returns, a graphic novel from 1985. Next slide, please. And some of them become a kind of just meditation on aging. And what the aging, in my case, the aging queer body is, and what does that mean within a context. Another conceit of this project is these two characters were living in Provincetown. So they're surrounded by a kind of queer culture from the late 60s until the 2000s. Next slide, please. This is another conceptual project that I did. This is from 2011 and a show that I did in New York, which is 100 Queer Men. I was really interested in digital culture and the way the avatar or the the profile picture is the way we were getting to know people in online communities. So by and large, there are some portraits in here of people that I knew and who were willing to sit for me, but many of these portraits were made of queer men that I was engaging or encountering online. Each of the panels is 9 by 12. The project had rules to it. I got 30 minutes to make the portrait, and then I got one chance to go back for 30 minutes after the initial whack at it was dry, because they're oil paint. And so they're made very fast, and they're very loose, and they're, in some cases, they're really great, and in other cases, they're not so good. But there are 105 of them because that's what the grid needed to be able to do. So next slide, please. And then I got to Provincetown. And I had spent a good part of my childhood coming to Cape Cod. My mother's cousin lived in Wellfleet. They were very close. We came several times a year. I had some periods in my adolescence where it was the late 70s and I wasn't being supervised, and I had a 10-speed bike. So I would ride my bike up to Provincetown without the adults knowing, and made it back in time for dinner. And part of that was that in my family, which were a little homophobic, there was a constant, the gays are ruining Provincetown. And I was like, I'm interested in learning more. So I rode my bike here to just check things out. And one of the things that happened when the summer I was 13 was I fell in love with this place. And I went home, or my parents came to pick me up because I'd been dropped off. And I said, I figured it out. Like, this whole, you've been asking me my entire life, what are you going to do when you grow up? I've figured it out. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to paint the Cape Cod landscape, and I'm going to live here. And the answer was, absolutely not. There are no jobs on Cape Cod, and artists are queer. And I was like, we're going to talk about this. And that's the rest of my high school years, was us talking about that. But when I was in my early 40s, I had an opportunity to come here. I was working on a writing project. That's the other side. I also have an MFA in creative writing. So writing's a big part of my practice as well. And I had an opportunity to show in a gallery here. So I started making paintings of Provincetown as I was encountering it as an adult. This is a large painting. It's 4 feet by 4 feet. Next slide, please. This is also a large painting, 4 feet by 4 feet. And these are explorations of, the first one is Washington Avenue, which is, a couple blocks that way. And this is the West End Commercial Street at the time. And I sold absolutely nothing because I was making large-scale paintings in a community that has small walls. And I was unaware of my context. So that's one thing that I want to impart to all of you who are visual artists. If you're putting work into the world, think about context and how it's going to be received. I have subsequently sold a lot of these paintings, but it took a while, and I had to learn a lot about what it meant to work in this context. Next slide, please. Another one, you can see some of the looser gestural stuff from the early paintings starting to show through here, even though I'm depicting. Next slide, please. And then I started walking. And walking and walking and walking. And part of that was that I was joking with some people last night that faculty meetings are not my favorite thing. And I was teaching in a program where we did a lot of online Zoom faculty meetings, and I would be furious. And so I'd just be like, I'm going to walk it off. And Thich Nhat Hanh has a walking meditation that I often use, which is with one footfall, you say, I am here. And with the other footfall, you say, I have arrived. And I would walk about 6 miles into the National Seashore doing that and being a little less enraged. And then I was like, oh, that's a painting. That's a painting. Next slide, please. So I started to explore what the shapes and the light and the color of the National Seashore is. This is quite large, 4 feet by 3 feet. Next slide, please. And you can see here, I start to go back to those preoccupations that were evident in my work, you know, at that point, like 30 years earlier. I'm bringing back a different visual language. Next slide, please. I'm starting to look at the elemental qualities of this place. I'm teaching a workshop right now, which is called 5 Ways Forward, which is looking at different lenses through which painters can look at the world. And one of the things that I'm talking about is, instead of painting the landscape, paint the weather. And how does that tell you something about the place that's different than when you paint the tree? Next slide, please. This was an important painting for me. It broke things up, it opened things up for me, and opened me to a new body of work. This is 3 feet by 3 feet. Next slide, please. And then I jump back. I encountered this abandoned house in Wellfleet, and I fell in love, and I was like, I am gonna paint ghost houses now. Like, that's my whole thing. And so I started, and occasionally I've got 1 or 2 more ghost houses. Next slide, please. My mother died in 2018, and I was her caretaker. And when I got back to Cape Cod, she died, both my parents died coincidentally on the Friday right before Memorial Day weekend, like 6 years apart. And I got back here, and I had a 4th of July show that I had to put together. So the month of June, I had to make a lot of paintings because I had this commitment. And I started painting, and I was really kind of unconscious about it. But one of the things I realized, and this was referenced in the introduction, is that I started to paint the places that my parents always took me when I was a kid. And, you know, so this is Great Island in Wellfleet. And when I was a kid, I was like, here, really, again? This is so boring. And as an adult, it's an amazing place. I go there a lot. But I started to realize, what started to unfold to me was that my parents had all of these special places here, that my mother had been coming here since 1936, and she brought my father when they first got engaged in 1948. And so they had this long history of returning, which is something that many people who come to Cape Cod do, that there's a kind, like, for many people, it's like, 3rd week of July is when I'm there, and they have a story of this place, and it is their spiritual home. And at this point, my work started to move towards the idea of painting as a kind of magic. Painting as a totemic object, painting as a way to imbue the energy and excitement and transcendent experience that many of us have in the landscape here, so that it's portable, so that it can travel with you. Next slide, please. In this painting, you can see my energy as a walker, like doing that Thich Nhat Hanh walking meditation. You can see each footfall almost as I'm zooming through. This was in the gallery I showed in Provincetown for a long time. And people would be like, oh my God, there's too much energy in that, and it's too fast, and it can't be in my living room. And then someone came in and was like, oh, I want that energy. So again, not every art object, not every art experience is for all of us, but we find our audience, or our audience finds us. Next slide, please. And then I was invited in 2017, right after Donald Trump took office the first time, to be part of a Valentine's Day show, which was called Love in a Post-Truth World. And I thought to myself, as a landscape painter, how do you approach this? At the time, Herring Cove Beach was washing out, and there were these huge pieces of asphalt that would be just turned by the ocean. And I was fascinated by it. And I thought, like, oh, well, this is a subject. So I made a small series of 6 paintings called At Love's Frayed Edge. And I thought, this is really funny. No one's going to be interested in these at all. And they proved to be like the most popular paintings I think I've ever made. I couldn't make, these fast enough. Next slide, please. So there's this kind of post-apocalyptic quality to these paintings. And it started me thinking in a different way of like a meaningful painting of a landscape, of this place in a way that's totemic, of this way that it's transcendental. It doesn't have to be beautiful, or you can make the damage of the world beautiful so that we look at it a different way. Next slide, please. Another painting from my interest in erosion. This is in Wellfleet, sort of where the moraine, which is 100 feet up, is sort of falling in constantly, and that parking lot's about to go in. So next slide, please. And then there's a stretch of, I bought a house in 2019 in Truro, and behind my house on the ocean side, there's this stretch from Ballston Beach to Newcomb Hollow that's about 6 miles. And on the moraine, there's no way in except to hike. Like there's no road out there, and there's no development. Nothing's built there, really. There were some things built there, but they've been taken down. But anyhow, it's a place that I return to over and over again. Next slide, please. Another ghost house. So this is an abandoned house that's still in Wellfleet, right off Route 6 on Peace Valley Road. And one of the just amazing things about this house is, like, the windows are all broken in, and the roof is falling down, and it's like, but there are these just eruptions of forsythia every spring. There's the echo of a landscape plan. There's, that broken tree on the right. The pieces that are there, it's a beautiful cedar that someone cared for at some point. And Cape Cod is like super haunted. I live in a 200-year-old house. I live with a lot of former residents, or at least their resident energy. And you're on the less woo-woo sort of level. You're in these houses, you're constantly aware that you're living with other people's decisions and other people's compromises. And so I'm working on a new series of these that I just started that's called Your Apparition Passes Through Me. So next slide, please. Again, that house no longer exists. It belonged to a friend of mine, Ann Peretz, and her daughter Lisa is a very good friend of mine. And I was fascinated with this house, and I painted it over and over again. And literally, the erosion claimed it a few years ago, and it was pulled down right before it fell in. But again, these kind of fragile edges I'm really interested in. Next slide, please. Again, my work fragments. And I'm like, that last one was like, all right, can we get every little flower and budding leaf? And then this one is just like kind of eruption. This is the trail that goes out to the dune shacks at Snail Road. And when you go out there at a particular time, any time of the year, but when the sun gets low and it gets very warm, the whole thing glows in gold and pink. And it's really like this. So I encourage you this week to go out there if we have a nice sunset. Next slide, please. Again, these other places, this is again Great Island, but these sort of moments that are fleeting and transcendent. Next slide, please. I also like to climb up on things that I probably shouldn't climb up on and look down, because there's something amazing about the sort of aerial quality of this place. And especially when you get out to Truro and Wellfleet, these moraines that are 100 feet above the ocean, and if you can get above them, to be able to look down and see the way that the edge is constantly moving and changing. Next slide, please. But then, you know, every single blade of grass. So switching back and forth, that this painting can't be told in the same way that the others that we just looked at can. Next slide, please. This is from a series I did, again, getting up high, looking down, called Poseidon's Kiss. And so the notion of there are all of these deities, all of these different ways of understanding the cosmology of the world, and you know, and they're active and they're part of our imaginations. Next slide, please. Love a snow fence. Next slide, please. Same place as all those grasses, the literal same place as those pink grasses, but, you know, different language, different time of year. Next slide, please. Back to color fields. So I was doing this back in 1995, and I did this in 2024. Next slide, please. And so the kind of last structure that I'm going into is paintings that I made in the last year. So I made, this is 4 feet by 4 feet. It's from a wonderful place called Bound Brook Island. And I'm really interested in these kind of uncanny moments that feel haunted, where the elemental aspect of the world is in charge. And it's just like, it's always in charge. But then there's these moments that the sun gets to a certain place, and you're like, I live on a planet. And so that's what this work, next slide, please. And then I returned to the figure this year. And back to these autobiographical figures. This is 40 inches by 40 inches, trying to explore something about my adolescence. Next slide, please. I'm doing a sequence of self-portraits, 20, 40, 60. I just turned 60, so this is the 40 portrait. Next slide, please. Again, this is a sunrise, the same sort of interest. One of the revolutionary things in my paintings this year is I started putting sparkle on the water, and everyone keeps talking about it. So this is one of 2 sparkle paintings. Next slide, please. And again, these sort of vast spaces out in the dunes, I can't get enough of them, and I return to them again and again. Next slide, please. More sparkle. This is a marvelous place in Truro called Brush Hollow, and you can climb up the moraine. It's one of the few places, maybe the only place on the outer beach where you can climb from the beach up to 100 feet because the way the topography is. Next slide, please. Again, that same place with those pink grasses, a different way of approaching it. Next slide, please. I just finished this one a month or so ago. It's the same place as the previous one, but it gives you a sense of how the edge is collapsing, and it collapses every season. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So this is my advertisement. I have a little show at the Captain's Daughters, which is at the base of Pearl Street. And they have some of these tiny paintings. They're postcard sized. And I've kept saying, like, this is 4 feet by 4 feet, or 4 feet by 5 feet, or, you know. I like to work large, but there's something about toggling between scale. And I think that's true in writing as well as in visual art making. A small painting is naturally intimate. It calls you to lean in. A large painting is immersive, and it has a natural vastness to it. For me, a great sort of exercise is to make a small painting vast and a large painting intimate. And that's the thought I'm going to leave you with. Have a great week.
More applause for Pete Hocking, please. What a great show. So thoughtful, so beautiful. And now we're going to do a little Q&A. We're live streaming this event, so wait for Matt to come to you with a mic so that people at home who are watching from home can hear your terrific questions. So anybody have a question for our speakers?
That was amazing. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. I have questions, and I'm going to just be brief because I have so many questions about your work. Do you work like on scene, or you work from photograph? Just because it's so real. So could you explain that? And then also, is so much work. I know as a writer, sometimes I'll spend like decades like working on something, and it seems like you just. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you work like that.
Thank you. So I went to Rhode Island School of Design in the 1980s, where there was no student life or any support for students. And so their strategy for keeping us out of trouble was to give us massive homework assignments. So one of the things that trained me, and I mean that not necessarily in the best way, but I would get a homework assignment of make 50 paintings of your hands or feet for tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I'd get that assignment at like 4:30 in the afternoon. And you learn very quickly that you can spend a lot of time making the perfect like rendering of your toenail, or you can wrap it up and get to the bar. And so I was taught to work quickly and intuitively without overthinking things. And so I'm a workhorse is the answer. The thing about, so I work from photographs, I work from memory, I work from drawings, sometimes I work on site. Sometimes I'll work on site on some of those little paintings, and I will bring them, and those will become the prompt to make a whole series of larger works. So, but more and more my work is coming from memory, because I've spent, I've spent 14 years trudging around in these places, and I know them, and I'm here all year, and I do it over and over again. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
All be at the bar.
Let's get to the bar.
So, Pete, in some of your paintings, the paint is at the service of the motif, and in others, the motif is at the service of the painting, right? And I'm just curious, and that's just an observation. In poetry, can it ever be said that the poem is at the service of the words, and the words are at the service of the poem?
I was almost checked out. I was like, oh, more questions for Pete.
I wasn't going to let you off the hook, man.
Did not see that coming. So word at the service of poem, or poem at the service of words? Interesting. No. If you allow me that, I'll never get back to you. I've never thought of in that way. What I'm thinking is, one thing is obviously in poetry, the poets in the house would know this, but in poetry, in the most condensed poems, every word is critical, right? Like, so if you take out a word from a poem, that poem is not the same poem. So maybe in that sense, the poem is also in the service of words, if that makes sense. I mean, the natural answer is to say, like, of course, the words and sentences and phrases make poems, so I think that would be a sort of natural response, but I'm also thinking in the other way around. A poet / teacher once told us that sometimes a poem teaches us to look at a word or a phrase or language in general in a new way, right? So maybe in that context, it is poem can also be in the service of words, right? And there's Shakespeare and other folks who are creating words for poems, right? So in that sense, they're actually creating a new, like literally a new word, right? New words. So maybe that's even a more radical way of poem being in service of words. But I think a poem that's part of the project is to help us see the language in a new way. I mean, partly the project of every poetry in general is also to renew the language, right? If we think of cliches, it's a very kind of interesting phrase because these days we say cliche, but cliches are essentially the phrases that were so beautiful, it became victim of its own popularity. Right? When it was first introduced, they were like, wow, magical. And then everyone started saying, and then the death of the phrase, right? So maybe poem helps us see the language in a new way, right? So I think inevitably it has to be in the service of words as well.
To continue that thread a little bit, I was fascinated when you say that your native tongue doesn't have a script. And also, there are always in languages, obviously, that aren't English, words that don't translate. So in your poetry, do you find yourself in your head trying to communicate something that you then have to translate in the words that you use in your poetry?
Short answer is yes, all the time, right? But I think, so I grew up speaking my mother tongue, which is Tamang, which literally translates as horse ghost. That's the one without script. At the government school, I started learning Nepali, which is a national language. And when I went to the boarding/English medium school, I started learning English. So for me, I always think of like Tamang as being my home language, mother language, Nepali being sort of like the community, because my friends are all speaking Nepali, and then always the English as the school/institution, right? So there's, I think, consciously or otherwise, I think that sort of division is always in my head. But when I translate, there are times when I hear a phrase in Tamang or Nepali and I'm so struck by them, I have to find a way to use that in English. But I think most of the time, my translation is really the emotions. And I really don't know how to really separate that from between languages. I think to some extent, that emotion already is sort of like multifaceted and complicated. And I think to some extent, when I write, it already is translated, if that makes sense. But there are times when I'm fascinated by language. For instance, in the first poem I read, the phrase double-bodied, right? I don't know if you're used to that phrase or not, but that's a literal translation of Nepali and Tamang. That's what they call when someone's pregnant. And I thought, wow, cool phrase. But I think someone was asking me, like, but does writing this book can also erase your language, especially my mother tongue? And the answer is yes and no. And what I was telling them was, this book is not about saying, hey, here are some Tamang language, like, or ideas, look at them, right? I don't think that's what I'm trying to do. I think this book is really about, to some extent, a portal, right? This book is inviting the reader to understand and feel that language that cannot be translated. And if they're really interested in that language, they can always go to Nepal and talk to my mom, Does that answer your question?
One more question.
Thanks. Is this on? Can you hear me? Pete, I was just thinking as I saw your slides about Rebecca Solnit's book, Wanderlust.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read
Yep.
that. Yeah, but it's almost as if the paintings, the landscape paintings, as if your feet are reading the earth. You know, and I just find that, I get that feeling, that sense of moving into those paintings. So I wonder if you could maybe just comment on that.
That's so interesting. I haven't thought about it in those terms, but it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful idea. But I do think about, and this goes back to the question of do I use photographs? What are my references? What's the embodied experience that I'm trying to convey? And a photograph has some visual information in it, but it doesn't have emotion in the sense that I've had this embodied experience in a place. And what I'm trying to do, oftentimes people will look at my landscapes and they'll say to me in a gallery, "Oh, you got the green of those grasses just perfect." I'm like, there's never been that green in that landscape ever. And part of that is that I actually I amplify things to resonate with what my emotional embodied response of the place is, what my memory is. And I don't mean to belittle the person who's saying you got the greens right. In fact, in their memory, like in my memory, I got the green exactly right. It has nothing to do with the grass. It has to do with an embodied experience.
Can we have another big round of applause for Pete Hocking and Samyak Shertok? There's a couple of books back there that Samyak will be signing. Don't forget to check out our gallery, the merch, and then come back tomorrow night for another great faculty event featuring poet Rowan Ricardo Phillips and our very own printmaker, Jim Stroud. Come back tomorrow night. Thank you very much. Have a great night.